neurodiversity exists in your workplace. It's just there. Right now, we have about 120 people around the world. Our vision is that within 5 years, that number will be closer to 350, maybe even close to 400. Whoever you are, that's how you lead. I said, well, if you're growing up and 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4, you learn how to be creative. I've seen different challenges and opportunities arise because of that neurodiversity. And so I've become much more aware of how neurodiversity impacts me and other people. When Shark Tank came out, I just watched every episode from beginning to end, as if I was watching a movie. And I would get so frustrated because I couldn't think of any ideas. At some point it clicked and I just said, well, maybe that's not my journey. Maybe my journey is not to come up with some product that can be sold to the masses. Let's look at who I am. Back to your whole point about authenticity. And I felt like I could move a needle, have an impact, and that I could feel good about doing good. In order for that vision to really come alive, I really had to step outside my comfort zone. I start with excellence. And everything that I do, I'm going to go over the top. People know they have to show up and bring an A+ product. If we want to get the best product, which is why I am here, then we want to make sure that people have what they need to succeed and however they can succeed. Because we hired them for a reason, right? People just knowing that, that I'm neurodiverse, I think that it gives them a comfort that if they do need to share along that line, that they won't be ostracized. Our culture is one of trust, being supportive, collaborative, and innovative. It's a virtual culture. The Melanie now is definitely much more likely to delegate and trust. That's really one of the things that I have become good at is, evolving, because I can't stay in one place. That just doesn't work. First of all, I get bored. My father was a minister. My mother was a teacher. And so some of those, some of the fundamental aspects of my faith keep me grounded. It reminds me that the power of the collective is very important.
This is the Business Philosopher Within You podcast. I'm your host, Bhavesh Naik. A foundational theme of this podcast is the idea that when we engage with our work, team, business, or organization with the absolute depth of our humanness, we unlock effortless productivity and performance. This in turn helps us create high-performing, long-lasting organizations that can stand the test of time. Our guest today exemplifies this philosophy through her journey as a business leader. Melanie Cook is the founder and CEO of Veritas Management Group, or VMG, a leading management consulting firm offering solutions to government organizations, the military, private corporations, and universities. Under her leadership, VMG embraces diversity, equity, and neuroinclusion in the workplace. Melanie is also a co-author of Business Success Secrets. Her chapter in the book, From ADD to Harvard, chronicles her journey as a young child who failed first grade due to undiagnosed ADD and dyslexia, but graduated from Harvard Law School on her way to founding and leading a multi-million-dollar company. I am pleased to have you on this podcast, Melanie.
Thank you. I'm honored that you asked me.
So, Melanie, bring us up to speed a little bit. Veritas Management Group. That's a very interesting name, Veritas. So what's the genesis of the name Veritas? And what was...
Huh?
Go ahead. I
was just going to say...
tag on a second question, which is, What was your inspiration for starting the company?
Business? Sure. So Veritas means truth in Latin. And actually, I got the name from my alma mater, Harvard Law School. It's part of our symbol and our logo.
Right.
And so it's always been a very near and dear phrase for me.
Sure.
And in terms of business, I know how important it is to have integrity in business.
Absolutely.
So when I was looking for a name, back when we incorporated in 2007, Veritas just really jumped out at me because it really reflected who I am. And I had been around long enough, the business community, to understand how important it is to remind yourself that integrity is important in business. So
Absolutely.
that's really how the name came about and how Veritas came about. I've always wanted to be a business owner, even when I was a little girl.
Mhm.
And my
Yeah.
mom used to have me read things, and she would just point things out that really kind of sparked that interest for me. I didn't know
Right.
exactly what kind of business I wanted to go into. So I thought about a couple of different things, and I actually even explored a few different kinds of businesses. I decided on this business because I worked in a similar firm for about 14
Sure.
years. And fortunately, that firm gave me the opportunity to see every aspect of the business.
Hmm.
I worked as a consultant in the business, a business development manager, sales, project
Right.
management, marketing, everything. And
Hmm.
so what I didn't know at the time is that that opportunity would lead me to this. So
Sure.
that's really how I got started in the business, is just, taking a page out of a very successful company that I work for.
Hmm. Absolutely. Right.
Mhm.
And you said veritas meaning truth. And, and the other word that comes to mind, especially when I have a conversation with you and in looking at your bio and the bio that
Mhm.
we shared in the beginning, authenticity.
Mhm.
I wonder if that's a part of it, because here you're telling your story, which is a beautifully inspiring story where a child at probably at the age of 6 or 7, you failed the first grade,
Mhm.
and then you find out that I can't even imagine what it was like. So could you share with us what it was like to be this person, this little person who is at the age failing the first grade, which must have been devastating, and then finding out that eventually that I have this ADD and or dyslexia. Could you just take us behind the scenes a little bit and kind of tell us this story from your perspective,
Sure.
who has
Sure.
lived it?
So, just to kind of set the stage, so I wasn't diagnosed until I was 34.
Oh, wow.
So I
Uh-huh.
knew something was happening, but I didn't know
Right.
what. So there's
Yeah.
a lot to be said about being able to identify something and give it a name.
Sure.
So let's kind of roll the calendar back fairly quickly for first grade. So
Yeah.
first grade was horrendous. Probably the
Uh-huh.
only thing that really saved me was that I'm such a social person that
Right.
I thrived in school from a social perspective.
Sure.
And so that kept me connected.
Yeah.
The other thing that really saved me was two things. One, I'm the third of three girls. We're just a year apart. So I had two sisters who were in my small. I live in a small town, so we all went to the same
Hmm.
school. So
Sure.
they went through school right before I did, and they did exceedingly well. And
Hmm.
so the teachers did not give up on me. And of course, it was a
Yeah.
community.
Right.
So the teachers knew my parents knew the teachers. So they would call them up and say, "Hey, this is what's happening." But I was a little surprised though that no stopgaps were put in place, so we just wouldn't get to the end and, "Oh, okay, well, I failed."
Yeah.
So honestly, I probably didn't know a whole lot about what was going on because I had no point of reference. There was
Sure. Yeah.
kindergarten and nursery school, but there was
Hmm.
nothing like that. There was no set of tests and all that.
Yeah.
But I do remember having an immense sense of fear
Oh.
because I knew I couldn't do the work.
Hmm.
And I knew that, I knew something was wrong,
Sure.
but I didn't know what, I didn't know how to express it.
Hmm.
Nowadays teachers would see what was happening and they probably would have been able to detect some patterns in the way that I
Sure.
wrote or something. But
Yeah.
that was not in place then.
Sure.
And so I
Absolutely.
struggled a lot. But like I said, fortunately, because of my parents and my family reputation and the fact that I was, cozying up to the teachers, um, that I was, I made it through.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening when I failed, they gave my parents the option. They said, well, she goes to a private tutor
Hmm.
throughout the summer. And if
Sure.
she reaches this level by the end of the
Hmm.
summer, then she can go to the second grade without repeating the first grade.
Right.
And so I figured some things out. And in
Yeah.
retrospect, um, I am not sure whether or not I learned how to read or if I just
Hmm.
said, you know what? I'm not going through this again. My sisters are out going to camp, Girl Scout camp every day, swimming and singing songs, and I have to stay at this tutor. We're going to figure something out. So I think to some degree, Bhavesh, I think I memorized how to say certain words. I'm sure I picked up some skills, but basically the biggest skill that I learned at that point was we have to figure something out because we're not going through this again. So I figured, so I learned how to work around things and find solutions. And that's really kind of what I do today. Some people in my company remark that Melanie always has resources. And so as we're sitting, some team members can be talking about a problem like, well, let's think about this. Let's think about that. And somebody asked me about that one day. And I said, well, if you're growing up and 2 + 2 doesn't always equal 4, you learn how to be creative. And so that's really what those lessons of having ADD and dyslexia taught me is, if the traditional route didn't work for me, then find my own path. As they say, find a way or make one.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that probably is the strength, right? You don't have to always walk the beaten path. You create your own path.
Yes.
Right. And that becomes an innate skill because you always have to do that, because most people don't have to do that.
Right.
Did this play a role in VMG and some of the principles and ideals that you bring to this company? So when you founded VMG, and I think there is also another company that you had founded and you merged the two eventually. So how is these challenges that you dealt with and then ultimately conquered and turned into strengths, how did that play into the founding principles of the company, VMG and the other company that he had founded?
Sure. So the other company that you're referring to is ASAP Talent Services, and we actually acquired that company last year. So there are 2 founders, and they're still on board on the management team of that company. And so the way that my neurodiversity played a role, it wasn't a prominent role in terms of the business that I have. We provide a lot of different services, primarily in the public health realm. So we don't provide any direct services that address neurodiversity. I've become much more aware of the needs in that community in the recent years. And so I've provided training and mentorship and that kind of thing, kind of outside of the business, and have been, more than happy to do that. But what I will say, though, is that obviously, anything you bring, whoever you are, that's how you lead. And so I've seen different challenges and opportunities arise because of that neurodiversity. And so I've become much more aware of how neurodiversity impacts me and other people throughout this journey. And then actually 2 years ago, I went through another assessment of my neurodiversity to see where I was at that time. I was having some more challenges, and I just felt like I needed some more insights. So those insights helped me to get the help that I needed at that point to run my company more efficiently. But also what it did, it showed that the dyslexia was still very present, but the ADD had come down a little bit in terms of the range because I had worked on that so much. And so that was very encouraging. But it also gave me a path to address some of the other issues dealing with dyslexia, and I can see the progress now.
Great. Yeah. I love the quote. Whoever you are, that's how you lead. That's a great quote. So, and that goes the authenticity of who you are and being transparent about that and leading from that. I love it.
Right.
So, VMG, something that we like to kind of get into a little bit on this podcast is this idea of who is the ideal client. And sometimes we call it customer avatar, but we kind of try to humanize this person. So your market is government organizations, universities, and corporate world, obviously. And so those types of things. And your solution is management consulting. So what is your core product or your flagship that you offer to these institutions? if you have one?
So we're interdisciplinary. And so we
Okay.
offer, we have so many things that we bring to the table. So
Yeah.
we are solution oriented. One of
Sure.
our slogans is solutions made simple. And
Hmm.
so, as I said before, our primary clients right now are public health agencies. So a lot of
Sure.
things that we do support public health,
Hmm.
both nationally and international. We
Sure.
have many team members that are located around the globe. And so we do a lot of work in the global health realm, both
Right.
from a surveillance standpoint, but primarily advisory work. We work directly with the ministries of health in those
Sure.
organizations. Stateside, we do a lot of policy work. We do a
Hmm.
lot of evaluation, data analytics, IT. So all those things kind of come together. So when
Sure.
someone hires us, they don't hire us just for one single thing. I don't think I have any
Right.
contract that really only involves one area because we can
Sure.
bring so many different areas and so
Yeah.
many different strengths to any opportunity.
Hmm. Sure. And is there within the public health sector, is
Mhm.
there a definition of the person that so for example, if you hired me as a salesperson or,
Mhm.
or the vice president of sales, and I'm talking to the sales organization and we are creating a strategy. How do we reach out to
Mhm.
people to gain new clients? Who am I reaching out to if I go to the top of the organization?
So it
Well,
depends on the structure. So if it's a
sure.
governmental agency, there are usually two different people that we look for. We either look for a customer, a program person that's
Right.
actually using the services every day, or someone on
Sure.
the contracting team, the acquisition team, so a contracting officer
Sure.
or a contract specialist.
Hmm.
And so the way that we usually develop those relationships is we start with our strengths. So we come in and we
Right.
talk about, we really try to understand the customer because
Right.
no matter how good we are, if we're not able to address and get to know a customer so that we can build a customized solution, that's not going to be a very fruitful
Of course.
engagement.
Yeah.
So that's really our ideal customer is either finding a
Sure.
program that needs some surge support. Oftentimes with government, they will hire contractors that can augment what they do. And
Hmm.
so, and oftentimes it's not something that they see as a long-term need. So it may be
Right.
just for a year, it may be for 2 or 3 years
Sure.
to address a particular problem. And that's where
Right.
contractors come in because we can surge and then we can kind of back down
Hmm.
as needed in a much more
Sure.
cost-effective way.
Sure. Absolutely. So when you started VMG, when I speak with entrepreneurs and business builders, I see two or three types of categories. There are those who have a vision of what they want to see their business to be. And I think you kind of talk about this a little bit, which is you were a child, you wanted to own a business. And so they have a vision of what they want the business to be. There are those who just start doing some things. I actually see a lot of these the business builders who just start doing ABC, XYZ, and something sticks.
Uh-huh.
And it's like it builds like the snowball, right? It builds like from the something that they do, it something sticks. They have attraction somewhere, and they begin to offer more and more of those things, and they build around that. And then sometimes you have someone in the middle who starts with an idea or a vision, and then they end up pivoting somewhere along the line, right? So do you fall in any one of these categories in terms of, did you have a vision when you started the company that was some kind of an image or some idea, or did it sort of evolve as you started the company and then it just evolved from there?
It's kind of both.
Okay.
So, when I had a vision as a young girl of starting
Yeah.
my own business or having my own business, I kind of thought more so from a product standpoint, what kind of
Sure.
products might I sell, right?
Yeah.
That was
Right.
probably the predominant thing that I thought about when I was growing up.
Hmm.
And when Shark Tank came out,
Yeah.
I would just watched every episode from beginning to end, as
Wow.
if I was
Uh-huh.
watching a movie. And I would
Right.
get so frustrated because I couldn't think of any ideas,
Yeah.
And so at some point it clicked. And I just said, well, maybe that's not my journey. Maybe my journey is not to come up with
Yeah.
some product
Right.
that can be sold to the masses. Let's look at who I am. Back to your whole
Yeah.
point about authenticity. So,
Right.
but even with starting the company, as I mentioned earlier, I started a company very similar to the company I used to work for.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that company, my major clients were at the same client that is my major client today. And
Right.
so I had those relationships. So I started there. And so they're a
Uh-huh.
public health agency.
Right.
And so I knew that from a passion standpoint, I'm very passionate about improving health.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I could move a needle, have an impact, and that I could feel good about doing good.
Yeah.
And so I started, but I couldn't tell you at that point in 5 years, this is exactly what we're going to be doing. This is exactly what I want to be doing from a content standpoint. I
Right.
knew that there were some fundamental things that I wanted to be able to provide, but then
Mm-hmm.
the market kind of drove it. So
Right. Sure.
as I started back in 2016, a lot of things have changed since then.
Yeah.
More things have moved to the cloud. So IT
Sure.
has changed a lot. We've kind of
Right.
shifted to incorporate more data analytics.
Uh-huh.
Organizations are much more conscientious about how they spend. So evaluation, program
Right.
evaluation, which helps to
Sure.
inform decision making,
Right.
has become a very important part of our business.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work with the military. I come from a military family. My father and my uncle were in the military, as well as some
Mm-hmm.
other members of my family. So we do some
Sure.
military work.
Yeah.
And so it just evolves. And one of the things that
Right.
I've learned, Bhavesh, is that customers, when you develop a good relationship and they respect
Mm-hmm.
you, they may
Yeah.
ask you to do things and they don't know whether or not you can do it. And
Yeah.
so, that's for me, that has been the exciting part, is
Right.
to develop that trust. So when they
Right.
come to us and say, well, can you do this for us? I'll go back to my team and I'll say, this is a trusted client. We want to help them out. How can
Sure.
can we find a way to make this happen? We're solution providers. So we've
Right.
rarely turned down, I can't say that we've turned down any requests to this point.
Yeah. Behind that vision, most of us have a why. And I think we kind of talked about this a lot already. But can you kind of encapsulate your ideals, your principles, and your values
Mhm.
that drives you to making this vision a reality?
So a couple of things. I mean, the foundational part is integrity. And, that
Yes.
sounds kind of trite, but I think any
Yeah.
business owner knows that at some point, their integrity has been called into,
Yeah.
called to the carpet, right? So when I first
Yes.
started, I got a couple of offers of, creating some fake past performance. And, I was thoroughly shocked. I'd never even conceived that someone would offer me that. And of course I, walked away from that and really, even though I run into that person from time to time, I really didn't want to have anything, to do with them,
Yeah. Yeah.
for a couple of reasons. One, I just really thought, well, does he think so little of me that he thinks that I cannot grow without taking that route? And then
Mm-hmm.
the other part of it is, if I had done that, he would forever be able to hold that over my head.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just said, I'll just grow slowly. I'll be a turtle. I don't have to be the
Yeah.
cheetah coming out of the start gate.
Gates. Yeah.
So that was the first thing for me. That was a foundational principle. The other thing
Sure.
that I really find very gratifying is something that I learned when I was working for the other company, and that is
Mm-hmm.
being able to help other people. So one, from an employee standpoint, being able to support our employees and what they want to do with their families, and then also giving opportunities. So one of
Yeah.
the things that women-owned businesses quite often do, and minority-owned businesses too, is that we give opportunities to professionals that may not have the same opportunities elsewhere. And
Right.
so opportunities, not just, at the entry level, but at senior levels.
Mm-hmm.
I have quite a few women who are program directors.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that in some comparable companies that are
Sure.
not woman-owned or minority-owned. And
Right.
so it gives me great pleasure to know that I help people with their career goals because
Mm-hmm.
this is not necessarily a retire from company. We don't have a pension. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I see myself, I want to, when someone leaves the
Yeah.
company, I want them to say that they left better than they came.
Mm-hmm. And going back to the vision a little bit,
Mhm.
here you are. You built a very successful company already. Do you have a vision in the future of what your company may look like, however far you can see in the future, a year, 5, 10, 20 years down the road?
Sure. So right now we have about 120 people around the world.
Sure.
Our vision is that within 5 years, that number will be closer to 350, maybe even
Wow.
close to 400,
Yeah.
or
Triple. Yeah.
500,
Mm-hmm.
and to expand more globally, to enter
Sure.
some markets that we're not currently in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the goal really is to grow organically. We may
Sure.
look at, acquiring another company or something of that nature.
Yeah.
So to grow organically and through, acquisition could
Sure.
be an option for us. But also even more than that, in terms of what we will look like in 5 to 10 years, I see that we'll be a bigger version of ourselves today.
Sure.
That we'll have. I was speaking with one of our teammates today in
Yeah.
Johannesburg, and we're talking about how isolated she felt. We do
Uh-huh.
have two teammates in Johannesburg,
Right.
but she said that she really misses the human interaction. I said, well, then the
Yeah.
burden is on you to find us an opportunity in
To grow it.
Johannesburg so we can,
Yeah.
open a regional office there. I'm very open to
Absolutely.
that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, it's a blank slate in terms of that,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate that. But even more than that, where we see ourselves is mentoring other firms.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we have two protege firms
Yeah.
that we're working with very closely so that we
Sure.
can help them launch and help them grow.
Yeah.
They've already started. They've been in
Mm-hmm.
business for a few years, and now we're trying to help them escalate and advance their businesses. So, and that's something that's very near and dear to me.
Yeah.
Community engagement is very
Yeah.
important to us,
Sure.
because the people that we work for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not
Yeah.
just A and D, but it's we help someone and then they help other communities.
Sure. One of the things that we like to get into, Melanie, is what we have a vision, right? So there is the place where we start, and then we have a vision, and we get that vision. So there is a place that we started a long time ago, then there is now, and then there is a vision of the future. And in between these points is a journey, right? And you had quite a journey just coming to this point, and it's an astounding journey with a tremendous success with your story. So on that journey, have you had any obstacles that you had to? And obviously, the personal, the ADD and dyslexia and overcoming those personal challenges and those kinds of things. But beyond that, developing VMG and building it to the place that it's at. What are some of the obstacles that you encountered, and how did you break through them? Because obviously you did, because you're here.
So, challenges are a part of what really
Of
sharpens
course.
you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, I would say that I knew starting the business that there were some things that I was good at and some
Mm-hmm.
things that, I struggled with a little bit. And so the things that I struggled with, I tried to bring in other people, to really help me with those things. But what I
Right.
quickly found out is that while that's good, I had to push myself to reach a certain level of proficiency with those things, or else I really couldn't lead them.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing about a small business is that it really is the founder's vision. And
Ah.
so,
Yeah.
in order for that vision to really come alive, I really had to step outside my comfort zone. So
Sure.
that was definitely a challenge. With the dyslexia, I had continuing problems with math. And
Mm-hmm.
so the financial management side has been an ongoing opportunity for me to improve. Let me
Yeah.
phrase it like that.
Uh-huh.
And so I have been very fortunate to surround myself with some very smart people who've been very patient with me. But at the same time, I had to stretch myself. And so now I have a mentor that's all we're going to focus on for the next 6 months is
Okay.
becoming
Excellent.
more
Yeah.
comfortable and more competent with that aspect of the company and not just
Sure.
the foundational parts, but okay, well, let's look at where we want to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's how I want to improve. I want to be able to, manage at a much higher level. So that's one example of a challenge that I kind of turn into an opportunity.
Sure.
And while I am comfortable talking to people and doing that kind of thing, I grew up in the deep South. And so one of the things that was important when I was growing up is, don't bother people, don't ask them for anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Be polite. Yeah.
be polite.
Right.
And sales 101, you have to
Yeah.
bother people. You have to
That's true.
ask.
Yes, true.
So I
And you
had to
have to
learn.
ask multiple times
You have to
sometimes.
ask multiple times and you have to get
Yeah.
creative with how
Right.
to ask the third, fourth, fifth time.
Right.
So I had to get comfortable with that. And actually, once again, at each level, I had to grow. So even now, I recently have a new coach
Mm-hmm.
that's coaching me specifically on the sales part for
Sure.
this next part of our journey. So
Yeah.
being humble has been
Yeah.
something that has been very important for me
Yeah.
because I had to admit, I need some help for this phase of my journey.
Absolutely.
So those are probably the biggest things for me. I would
Mm-hmm.
say balance too. I think that's the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I'm at a point now where I'm not doing everything. I'm not writing all the proposals. I'm not going out looking for personnel, which is what I did in
Yeah.
the beginning. So now I have a team, but still from a strategic standpoint, it can keep me up at night. So I have to be very intentional about that balance and
Yeah.
shutting down. I haven't cracked that nut totally. But
Right.
I'm keeping hope alive that I'll, continue to balance a little bit
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. I'm in training and learning in the communication business, and I always get goosebumps when I see someone who says that the humility of accepting that, hey, I'm not perfect, and I need to learn and I need to grow, and that's a lifetime of a challenge, if you will, or so we never stop learning,
Uh-huh.
and here you are. So doesn't matter how far and you go and how successful you become, you're always learning, right? So uh, thank you for sharing that perspective because
Uh-huh.
that's very inspiring. And a big part of the journey is those that we bring along with us on that journey, right? There's a reality and that there is vision and there is a journey between those 2
Mhm.
points. But there are those who trust us to come along that journey. And so that goes into employees and people that we hire and people that we work with, team members and folks like that. And you obviously have a culture within your company because when you grow to 100 employee plus, even at 10, 20 people, we have culture, right? How would you characterize the culture of VMG today?
So, interesting because we used to have this conversation a lot. First of all, it's a virtual culture.
Sure.
Um, from a corporate standpoint, we have a corporate headquarters.
Right.
We were planning to get an office location in the fall of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And even after people started going back to work, we realized that we were very productive
Yeah.
without being in the same place. And because we didn't have to collate proposals and turn in
Right.
any paper-based things, we just really did
Sure.
not need to be in the same place all
Right.
the time.
Mm-hmm.
So our culture is one of trust.
Right.
Because we don't have a culture where we're checking on other people, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So if you get up at 2:00 in the morning and do your work, and you
Mm-hmm.
show up for the meetings during the day,
Yeah.
that's perfectly okay.
Right.
So what happens there is that it allows people to travel.
Mm-hmm.
So for our federal government customers, there are some restrictions there that you can't travel outside the country and access their systems,
Right.
unless you have a specific computer. So that's one of the only limitations on our
Right.
telework. But other than that, I would say 95% of our positions with our customers are 100% telework. Some of our
Okay.
some of our team members are going back into the office and working a few days a week. We have one
Sure.
team that works 5 days a week in the office, and one of our military customers. So
Mhm.
I would say that our one of the foundational principles is, once again, that integrity and that trust. The
Right.
second one is supportive.
Right.
We try to support our teammates.
Mhm.
I actually travel quite a bit to show that support. I traveled to Africa to visit some of our teammates
Wow.
earlier
Yeah.
this year. And
Uh-huh.
one of our customers remarked that, no, it does. I went to one place that was somewhat remote,
Right.
Lesotho, South Africa.
Right.
And someone commented that no owner had ever, come just to visit.
Uh-huh.
And we
Yeah.
only have one employee there, but that didn't matter. I don't want
Sure.
our people to feel like they're isolated. So I
Yeah.
visited 2 people and actually picked up an employee there. I met someone, and a few months later, we actually ended up hiring them in Johannesburg.
Yeah. Mhm.
I visited people in this past weekend. We went to Colombia to visit some of our teammates in Fort Jackson. So I've traveled wherever I go. I try to make sure I visit other people. So that support is very big. This year, actually, we had a fly-in. So we flew
Right.
in all of our remote teams to Atlanta.
Uh-huh.
Except for our overseas team members, we'll figure out a way to get them together in some centralized location. But we flew in everyone for a 3-day event. And
Yeah.
that was really helpful in terms of making it easier to work together outside of these virtual meetings.
Sure.
So being supportive, collaborative, and innovative,
Yeah.
I would say that's really our culture.
Right.
Our culture, I think another big aspect of our culture is that even though there are layers in the company,
Mhm.
um, everyone has my cell phone.
Right.
But what I find is that it can be kind of lonely at the top. So people don't
Uh-huh.
always call me.
Right.
So I have to trust that my other team members, on the leadership team, are having those engagements with our team members so that they are
Sure.
staying in touch with them and they're keeping their
Right.
finger on the pulse, because I just can't do that. People will not be as frank with me, and I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Right.
So it's like I said, it's a culture of trust,
Yeah.
and it's a culture of high productivity,
Mhm.
because people know when I show up trying to market VMG, I start with excellence. And everything that I
Yeah.
do, I'm going to
Sure.
go over the top.
Yeah.
And so people know they have to show up and bring an A+ product.
A game. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
plus. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, A+. That's right.
On that point, neurodiversity it seems like we talked about this a little bit before, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of what you promote personally,
Mm-hmm.
and with your story also,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like you bring that into your organization. What are some of the challenges if I have a company and I want to promote and support and embrace neurodiverse employees, parts of it? And good news today is that we're accepting it now, and then more and more. For example, in your case, you didn't know that you had ADD until you were 36. We have those tools now to kind of uncover those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
challenges and
Exactly.
and work with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you creating it, you're bringing that into your culture a little bit. So, first of all, how do you kind of make that an intentional thing to have that as a part of your culture, if you do that? And what are some of the challenges associated with that, making that a part of the culture?
Sure. So I think the first thing is just acknowledging that, first of
Yeah,
all, neurodiversity exists in your workplace.
that's true. Yeah,
It's just
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Some estimates are as high as 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people are neurodiverse, um,
Hmm.
covering
Yeah,
autism, dyslexia, ADD, and all the variations therein.
sure. The
And so
spectrum,
that's the
right?
first thing. I
Sure.
think that if anyone denies that, they're probably, they probably have a neurodiversity neurodiverse condition.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so that's the first thing, is just acknowledging it's here.
Right.
And if we want to get the best product, which is why I am here, then we want to make sure that people have what they need to succeed and however they can succeed. Because we hired
Sure.
them for a reason, right? We may
Yeah.
or may not have known if they were neurodiverse. That's not
Yeah.
something we ask about. And
Sure.
so the first thing is creating that culture of acceptance.
Right.
The second thing is creating a culture of awareness. And so through our EAP program, we do
EAP
offer
stands for
employee assistance program.
okay. Yes.
That actually offers testing procedures and resources. And so
Sure.
through that, we can get, people can get plans. They can come to our HR department and ask for reasonable accommodations.
Sure.
I think that having a virtual environment certainly helps, right? Because
Right.
a lot of
Sure.
times if someone needs, if they need an accommodation, it's around the pace of work.
Yeah.
And so whatever those accommodations are, we look at those and we make decisions about how we can support if needed.
Right.
But I think that people just knowing that, that I'm neurodiverse, I think that it gives them a comfort that if
Yeah.
if they do need to share along that
Yeah.
line,
Yeah.
that
Right.
they won't be ostracized.
Right.
I think the biggest challenge at the same time is that it's kind of like a scarlet letter, and a lot of people are not as comfortable as I am
Right.
articulating that they are neurodiverse. And when
Sure.
I thought about that, I said, well, I have my own business, so I don't have to worry about someone canceling me or putting
Right.
negative,
Sure.
spin on what I do. Someone
Yeah.
asked me, "Well, aren't you concerned that your customers will be concerned?" And I
Yeah.
said, "No, I'm really not."
Yeah.
Because first of all, when I present, when I have a capabilities presentation with a customer, I don't talk
Right.
about that. And like I said, I know that we present an outstanding product. And
Sure.
so, usually, when my customers at whatever point, if they do find out that, they're just like, wow, you've done all this and, you have
Yeah.
these issues. Can
Sure.
I buy your
Right.
file for my husband, for my wife, for my, for
Yeah.
my coworker. So I
Yeah.
think if anything, it creates a little bit more stickiness and it
Right.
creates a level of respect.
Yeah.
And then they're more comfortable sharing on their end. So
Yeah.
so that's really the culture that we try to build, is that, but by the same token, we don't want anybody to feel left out if they're not
That's
neurodiverse,
true.
because, you know,
Exactly.
one of the things
Yes.
that
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
of the secrets for my success is that I know I'm neurodiverse, so I surround myself with people who are much better at some things than I am.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have learned is that on this spectrum, there can be someone who's just like me, but if they figured it out much younger,
Yeah.
then their antidote for that may be that they're overly organized.
Sure.
And so, so I just really look at, well, how do we accomplish work? And
Mhm.
how does that best work for you?
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I think that those are the founding principles for me. And
Sure.
knowing that I'm neurodiverse is just really creating a culture of acceptance, awareness, and action.
Yeah.
And letting people know that that's something they don't even have to come to me about that. They can go to HR. They can go directly to HR, and I will never even know.
Sure.
But I
You're
just
right.
want people to know that they're supported. And
Right.
at the same time, we always have to balance. We get paid for a product.
That's
And
true.
so, it's that thing of how can we get to the best product that we can create.
Sure. Yeah. How do you have that excellence while
Mhm.
also supporting the the diversity in all
Exactly.
manner? And I also have to believe that you've done something in your personal life, which is that what could be a perceived weakness, you turn that into a strength,
Mhm.
right? For example, there are some things that don't come to you, and for all of us, there are things that don't come easily to us. So we find strategies to work around it or work with them, and
Exactly.
that gives us certain certain skill muscles, basically, if you will, to deal with that, and then it becomes a habit, and because of that, it gives us a strength in that area, right? So what could be perceived as a weakness becomes sort of a strength, right? And then, obviously, that strength, we need to make it marketable and bring it into our place of work. So on personal level, you've already done that. And I have to believe that you probably also would support that and do that culturally within the organization, so that, when you present it to people, what could be perceived as a weakness is actually a strength. For example, when you said
Absolutely.
you were presenting to the potential clients, right? And
Yeah.
your
I mean,
capabilities and things like that. Yeah.
and that's the secret of any business owner, no matter what it is. You have to turn
Sure.
those weaknesses into strengths and find the humility in
Yeah.
it. But also
Right.
you have to, because there's no whatever works today may or may not
Yeah.
work in 5 years based on technology or whatever. And
Absolutely.
so we have to evolve.
Yeah.
And that's really one of the things that I have become good at is, evolving, because
Sure.
I can't stay in one place.
Yeah.
That just doesn't work. First of all, I get bored.
Yes.
And so I like that challenge. But I
Yeah.
also like, I also like seeing how technology, helps to solve problems, because I've used technology to help me with my
Yeah.
neurodiversity. I can't even imagine doing what I'm doing right now in a completely
Sure.
paper-based environment.
Yeah.
I just can't even
Right.
imagine.
That's true. Yeah.
So, so for that, I'm very
How
thankful.
did they ever do anything,
I
right?
know.
Before
How did we
emails,
ever do
with
it,
paper and
right?
pencil. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I still
So
wonder that sometimes. Yeah.
I know, I know.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy seeing how things evolve, and, kind of
Yeah.
keeping in touch, making sure that we always have some young people on our team to teach us things, and
Yeah.
embrace it and not shun them and say, oh, these young people, they don't know anything. Well, actually, they know a lot.
Yeah. Oh,
And they're
yeah.
the
Yeah.
future. So, if I want to be in business in 10 years, it's important for me to understand where the people who will be in our workforce in 10 years, how are they shaping? What are they doing?
Yeah.
What's important to them? And it's different.
Sure.
Millennials
Yeah.
place a very high value on community engagement and service.
That's
Uh,
true. Yeah. The
Extras like
otherness,
me.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Extras like me,
Yeah.
we're very hard workers. And so we have a very
Yes.
strong work ethic. And Gen Z,
Yeah.
they have a different kind of work ethic, and it's not good or
Sure.
bad. It's just a
Yeah.
different way of getting work done.
Right. Right. Yeah. And the leader's job is to see that and find a way to still get the A+ productivity out of them,
Right.
and the A+ excellence out of them.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I admire your ability to, you said you used the word evolve, always evolving and always changing and always reaching out, always looking within and finding for, place that you can get better. And with those, I wonder, as human beings, we also have the need to be rooted, and we need to have a place to be grounded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as you pursue all these changes,
Mm-hmm.
and you evolve and do all these things, what are some of the things that you kind of root yourself in or ground yourself in? What are some of the things that you think are unchanging that you kind of embrace and hold on to?
So my father was a minister, my mother was a teacher.
Hmm.
And so some of those, some of the fundamental aspects of my faith keep me grounded,
Sure.
because, like I said, humility is a fundamental
Yeah.
principle of my faith. And
Right.
so those things, humility is certainly, the
Yeah.
thing that keeps me grounded,
Right.
and kind of getting out of myself, and
Yes.
doing public service.
Yeah.
I took a picture right before this started. I took a picture of some gifts that the firm bought that we're going to donate for an Angel
Uh-huh.
Tree project. A few weeks ago, right before Thanksgiving, we did some public service at Meals on Wheels Atlanta, where we packed, I think
Very
this year we
nice.
packed maybe 150. Last year we packed 300
Uh,
boxes of food for elderly people.
yeah.
And we do a turkey giveaway.
Hmm.
Um, so those things help keep me grounded, because
Yeah.
it reminds me that the power of the collective is very important. and
Yes.
that,
Absolutely.
we're in a very privileged position to be able to have
Yes.
jobs,
Yeah.
that can pay for things.
Right.
And so those things kind of staying in touch with other people, because like I said, it's lonely at the top.
Yeah.
And so making sure
Absolutely.
that I do things that allow me to see how other people are living,
Hmm.
um, to, constantly talk to people outside my comfort zone is
Right.
really important.
Hmm.
Um, and just traveling around the world helps me to
Yeah.
see people in other walks of life and other cultures.
Sure.
So those are the things that really keep me grounded. And I
Yeah.
think too, my fear of everything imploding
Hmm.
keeps me very grounded.
Hmm.
I don't take it for granted that that everything that I know today will be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
So just, keeping in touch with the reality as a company that focuses on governmental entities, we have a new administration coming in. And so, but
Yeah.
I've been around through several administration changes. So it
Sure.
doesn't really bother me, as much
Yeah.
as it may bother some people.
Right.
An administration change, no matter which way it goes, it's still going to be change. So learning
Hmm.
how to operate at a high level in a
Yeah.
changing environment is
Right.
something that keeps me grounded because, like I said, what
Sure.
worked yesterday may not work,
Yeah.
in March. So
Right.
it gives me an opportunity to sharpen our pencils and
Yeah.
maybe, look at things from a different perspective, based
Sure.
on other priorities. So
Hmm.
that's what helps to keep me grounded. Just
Absolutely.
really just staying humble.
Sure. Yeah. And the last question before the last question, so second to
Okay.
last question is entrepreneurial journey. It changes us, and you are so brave at accepting the change, and I find that rare that someone who kind of thrives on change, right? It's you kind of embrace it and you roll with it. So if you look at the arc of your career, you know, the you before VMG and you after. So there's a point before you started this company. So the business journey changes us from the inside out. Sometimes it doesn't. So is there a true statement for you? So is there a big change? So, Melanie before business building, entrepreneurship, and Melanie after today. What is the biggest change that you have noticed in you? What was it that, how have you changed through your entrepreneurial journey? And what is that? If you could pick out one thing, that's the biggest change that you've seen within yourself.
I think being more decisive. I
Okay.
think I've learned how to make decisions much more quickly.
Yeah.
Learn how to get the insights that I need much more quickly.
Sure.
And executing on that.
Yeah.
And within that, delegating.
Sure.
Um, so, day one, as I said before, I
Yeah.
did everything.
Yeah.
And so the Melanie now is definitely much more likely to delegate and trust that
Yeah.
someone else can get it done. But I would say
Sure.
probably the number one thing that is different now is my ability to make decisions,
Hmm.
well-informed decisions much more quickly.
Absolutely. Great. You mentor folks and someone comes to you and says, I'm starting a business and I want advice from you.
Mhm.
If there was one thing that you would tell this person, only one thing, what would that be?
Know your dream.
Okay.
And that sounds very simple, but a lot
Uh-huh.
of people really don't know their dream.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
and
Yeah. And
so,
your dream, right?
yeah, your dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is your dream? And
Exactly.
so that's what will keep you going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so knowing it from the perspective of, so for instance, my dream when I was a little girl was to own my own business.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that was a starting point. But
Right.
obviously I had to add a lot more color to that. Well, what does that mean?
Yes.
Do I
Yeah.
want to sell products? Do I want to manage employees? A lot of people don't want to
Yeah.
manage employees.
Right. Right.
So just knowing your dream
Yeah.
is the thing that I would say to people kind of
Sure.
out of the gate, because all the other things, you can go to SBA, you can go to a lot of different places and they can help you with the business plan and all
Right.
of that. But I think knowing your dream is
Yeah.
a very good starting point that I would
Right.
start with.
Absolutely. Right. That changes everything because
Mhm.
I've worked with a lot of folks, and one thing I notice is that they say this is when you ask someone what's your dream, and they say this is my dream. But the big question and always a big challenge is that really my dream, or is that my mom's dream, or is it my dad's dream, or is it my teacher's dream, or it's the society's dream, or someone wants me to do this, right? Separating my dream from everybody else's dream, or everybody else what they want me to do
Right.
versus what I want to do,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's so important. That's
Yes.
so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were fortunate enough to have made that distinction very early in your life, and you kind of held on to it. And so here you are, right? So at this point in your business and your career where you are, if there was one thing that you could have a conversation with someone about, something important, someone wants to reach out to you, who is the person that you're looking to have a conversation with or connect with at this point? And how do they get hold of you? How do they get in touch with you?
So there's several different ways. LinkedIn is probably the easiest.
Yeah.
Melanie Cook on LinkedIn.
Sure.
I think it's listed as Atlanta, Georgia, but definitely, through the veritasmanagementgroup.com website.
Right.
ADHD-to-Harvard.com
Okay.
is the website for my neurodiversity interest.
Sure.
So I think those are the best two ways, through LinkedIn and through through ADHD to Harvard.com and veritasmanagementgroup.com.
Okay. We'll put all of those links in our show notes so that people can read about you and your initiatives and the company and your book and things like that.
Okay.
So this was a great conversation. One of the things that I love about what I do here on this podcast and having these conversations is the fact that I come changed. I come transformed. And, just as you love learning and evolving and bettering yourself, I'm in the same boat. So I'm always learning something. And when I look at the footage again and I'm editing, I learn even more things. So that's actually the best perk of this thing that I'm doing with the podcast. So I thank you for being on this podcast and sharing your journey and sharing your story.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's always an honor and a blessing to be able to share my journey and share what I've learned. You also said that you wanted to ask me a couple of questions about the podcast, so I'm open to that.
Okay, great. Excellent. Yeah, so, first of all, what was it like? So actually, let me ask the first question is there any way that we can improve? So where is it that right from the time that, I got in touch with you and I approached you and, we did that exploration meeting and here we are all to this point. Are there any places where something can be improved?
Let me say this. I've been on several podcasts and this has been the best experience I've had. You were thoroughly prepared. You made sure that I was prepared.
Right.
I kept getting the reminders and, that was great, especially for somebody who's neurodiverse. That was great. And I went back and I looked at the prep materials and you very clearly laid out, how you were going to start, what the purpose of the podcast is.
Sure.
We had the test run. So I can't really think of anything else. I think everything just happened very well. And I know the benefit of, of being very organized, and that's what you were. You were very organized. So I would say just keep doing what you're doing. And you'll continue to be successful.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That means so much to me. Because we do put a lot of effort into prepping and preparing and rehearsing and things like that. And sometimes I probably come off a little bit too detailed. It's like, why do we have, some people say, why do we have to do this pre-meeting before the real meeting and
No
things
such
like
thing.
that. And I've stuck to my guns and I said, no, we have to do that prep meeting.
Yeah.
Because it's at the same time, we don't want to do a scripted conversation either. I don't want to give you all the questions and just go down the question. It has to be a conversation. So we script it and we have an outline, but we throw that away. And then we have a person-to-person, honest, authentic conversation. There's the word authenticity.